Now that's significant. The Market Research Podcast.
There's always something new that's on the horizon. The challenge for market researchers, and this isn't something new, is how can we adapt to ensure we continue to deliver understanding and insight to those who need to act on it. Hi all, thanks for joining us on this latest episode of Now That's Significant, a market research podcast. I'm your host, Michael Howard, the head of marketing at Infotools. Today, we're joined by Aarti Bhaskaran, who is the Global Head of Research and Insights at Snapchat. Thanks for joining us on the show, Aarti.
Well, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So here's some background for those of you who don't know Aarti. She has over 15 years of experience in consumer insights and media effectiveness measurement. In her role, Aarti leads a team with a mission to educate the advertising industry and marketing community on new ad formats, audiences, and platforms through data-driven insights and empirical evidence, and be a voice of Snapchat at industry forums and conferences. Aarti's career has taken her across the globe. Prior to joining Snap, she was a client leader at Kantar in US, managing a portfolio that included Microsoft, LinkedIn, Visa, TikTok, and Snapchat. Before that, she built the insights and analytics practice at Mediacom Canada, where she launched Canada-specific solutions to measure media performance. She moved to Canada from Singapore, where she was Asia-Pacific lead on brand performance and creative development research for PepsiCo and other global clients. Aarti, what's the most significant thing you're going to talk to us about today?
Well, you see, I would say, the privilege of working in the tech industry that's always changing and evolving. And with it, I think the research that we do also evolves. So what I love to talk about today is, some of the work that we have done in understanding new products, new formats, and how you need to either think of a new approach or adapt what's existing to research about things which are not yet, commonplace.
No, just reflecting on your introduction there and the fact that you've lived in such different environments, places around the world, it helps broaden your view as a market researcher as well. So that helps feed into the perspectives that you can share as well.
Yeah, absolutely. US is like the fourth country that I've lived in. And obviously technology is in like different stages in different markets. And so are audiences, so are their motivation. So it's very interesting to study the same thing across the globe.
Yes, that's right. So let's talk about your background in market research, perhaps some of the key moments in your career that we didn't touch on in the intro that led to you working at Snapchat.
I think I was very lucky enough to, shall we say, accidentally discover market research right out of university. I didn't know what I was planning to do. I went for an interview and then here I am, oh gosh, like 17 years later. So I started my career in India at a time when a lot of brands were entering the market. Pretty much started my career with doing a lot of innovation research and audience understanding and like trying to explain what mobile wallet is, 15 years ago and assessing if it had potential. So that was like my entry to market research. And that's what fascinated me in this particular field. But when I moved to Singapore, it was a switch and we worked with more mature brands. It was a lot about brand strategy and creative development. So a completely different space. And again, lucky enough, when I moved to Canada, a completely different geography, but also different line of research, which is all about media planning and effectiveness. So now I'm kind of moving downstream, if you will, along the product funnel. And you're at like the final stage of delivery to the consumers and convincing them to buy. And then proving that the money that you spent, whether it's marketing or media, was working. So now I'm able to bring, I guess, all of these elements that I've worked on to the work that I do at Snap, because my team, looks after the who, what, when, where, how, why of Snap, right from the audience who use the platform to the ad products which are developed, as well as talking to advertisers about effectiveness.
Oh, sure. So what about some of the newer formats and products that you've been working on at Snap?
Yeah, I think there are like several aspects that I can talk about. One is, of course, Snap being a technology platform. We are always innovating, and that's one of the things I like about the platform that attracted me to the role to begin with. And obviously, we are considered to be leaders in augmented reality, which is essentially the app opens up to the camera, and through the camera you can apply effects or a digital overlay on the real world, whether it's you or your surroundings. That's the simplest way to explain it. But like conceptually, it's easy to think about it, but to research it is challenging, because the way in which we do our research is through the device, but the device itself is the format, right? So often when we are trying to understand not just what people think about the format, because some of them don't even know they're using AR, to even measuring its effectiveness, we're constantly thinking about either adapting current technology, methodologies, or trying to invent, if you will, new ways. And we are typically first to market when it comes to even establishing benchmarks for augmented reality. And the other space in which we have done a lot of work, I would say, is the audience space, because we are a platform that does attract and retain quite a fair amount of younger audiences. And there's always a lot of interest. I know people do a lot of generational research, and I just see it as looking at, a decade, because each decade you're influenced by what's going on in the world and technology. So trying to understand 13-year-olds today, the way you speak to them, the way you understand them is very different from research when I started out.
No, for sure. So Snapchat's undoubtedly doing some groundbreaking work in the digital space. As we mentioned as well, you work with a lot of marketers and advertisers to help them understand the space as well. Now, this might be more skewed at marketers, because I know as advertisers, I worked in advertising as a creative for several years. We've been trying to sell in AR, augmented reality ideas for the better part of a decade now. So I'm assuming that there is some resistance to newer technology like AR and whatnot. How do you tend to show people the value of being present in this kind of medium?
Yeah, I mean, there are several dimensions that we looked at, right? I think the first is to establish the case for new technology and make sure that people don't think it's like the next shiny thing without depth. So, a lot of research that we do sometimes is very foundational in terms of how consumers are thinking about the format. And typically we also ask marketers what they think about the format, and we kind of expose the gaps, if you will, in perception, right, between what marketers think about augmented reality versus consumers. But the other thing is also we do a lot of work in trying to understand the utility that audiences find when it comes to new formats. And often it's something they can't always say. So it's something that you have to derive, later on. And that's why the methodologies that we use is a mix of, yes, data research, but also, we tend to use a lot of neuroscience, a lot of behavioral research, and then speaking to experts, because often it's not an area that I used to do, apply a lot, of technique that I used to apply a lot. But what I've realized is when it comes to new technology, new products, the expert interviews, if you will, gives you great fodder to think about how you want to talk to consumers, right? And what are the trends and hypotheses that you want to test. So once we kind of use these techniques to lay the case for a more practical case for augmented reality, right? And then the third element is proof of performance, because what I've also noticed is there's a lot of enthusiasm to adopt new technology, but also people are like, well, I'll wait to see if somebody else does it and it's successful, then I'll invest. So, we do a lot of lab-based environments as well to show the value that this ad product can have in like the media mix. How do you even measure effectiveness, and challenge some industry standards, if you will. Is some of the work that we've done.
Yeah, coming back to a point that you made in passing, some people are using augmented reality but don't even know it. And like that's a huge win for technology, because I've always been on the view, if you can make technology disappear, and people are just using it without even knowing, that's the ideal. And then being able to show marketers that like this is what people are actually doing, they're already utilizing it. So why not jump into that space? Sounds like a good place to be.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a bit more about some of those methodologies. What are some that you've had success with?
I've like referenced some of them, but I can go into a bit more detail, right? One is, of course, expert interviews. Look, I've done a lot of B2B research, during my other roles that I mentioned, but typically you go into it with the intention of information gathering or like assessing market sizing. Those are the reasons why I've done that kind of work. But what I discovered is when you are talking about something that's either still conceptual, like AR, VR, AI, and so on, or something that's quite new, these experts kind of provide you with potential trend use cases that you test. So you almost use them as like your sounding board, if you will, to develop your hypothesis and to make your brief stronger. And in our case, our experts are not just industry experts. At Snap, we also employ people who are at the cutting edge of technology. So some of our experts come from within as well, which is not a source that I've typically tapped into a lot. Yes, you speak with sales and marketing, but here we are speaking to like a product engineer or an AI, engineer who approaches it through a different perspective. So that always helps. The other techniques that we've kind of utilized is ethnographies. And again, because of technology, because a lot of the work we did was also during COVID when usage was like spiking through the roof, was mobile ethnographies, where you're kind of observing day in the life of, but using technology, because obviously we're studying new technology. So that's another technique. I think it's been quite successful for us in trying to piece together where AR fits in a person's life without like asking them. The other technique we have found useful is neuroscience, and it's a fascinating field because again, it's a technology that's become scalable. I remember back in the day when you used to measure, brain scan, you got to bring people to like a hall, and that kind of research still happens, and you only do 30 at a time. But nowadays you can do galvanic skin response or heart rate variation measurement, or even attention measurement, which is a lot of eye tracking, facial coding at scale, which is fascinating because, I work on a global team. So it is important for us to see how technology transfers in different markets and cultures, and that's possible. And it's fascinating to then overlay stated responses with this kind of neuroscience.
Yes, I have had Laura Bevan Yates on the show before, and she had to pivot her business in the pandemic, and like you're saying, is far more scalable now as a result of it. So it's really good to come across those kinds of challenges and then be able to move on and add value in different ways.
Yeah, and and now I feel like the next step is taking that data and modeling it. And again, because of whether it's your large language model or AI enabled, modeling, you are now able to take that data that's like a standalone study and apply it. Whether you apply it in planning, you're applying in campaign measurement. And I feel like that's like the latest line of work that, we are.
Yes. So you must have uncovered some quite fascinating findings with the neuro work. Are you able to share anything of interest that you've uncovered from this kind of approach?
Yeah, quite a few. Let me like take you through some of my most favorite findings, if you will.
Sure.
I think especially, and look, we've used the neuroscience technique to understand how people consume content on the platform, to understand how video and AR works together, and also to understand what kind of emotion, is evoked with content and with formats. And I think, one of the things that surprised me, I would say, is the way in which consumers engage with augmented reality and how it differs from video. By that I mean that when you're like watching a feed, if you will, and I'm sure everybody is quite familiar with all of the platforms that's out there, it's quite passive and you're very quickly scrolling through, right? So the way you're looking at content, the way you're processing is you're making quick decisions as you're scrolling through. Now, we were expecting people to be a bit more engaged when it comes to lenses, because you're putting things on yourself or you're placing a furniture in the room. So perhaps you're a little bit more engaged. I think what was mind-blowing was how much more engaged and leaned in people are. And we were able to kind of measure it based on, and we've done several neuroscience techniques based on whether it's heart rate variability or based on whether it's eye tracking. And we also delved into what does that mean for brands. And one of the things that we noticed was it actually has the power to change how people think about brands, the kind of engagement that you have. And we were first thinking, well, are people spending a lot of time on lenses because they're figuring out how the technology works, or are they absorbing the experience? And what we have noticed is people are actually absorbing the experience. That translates to like 4 times more attention is being placed on lenses compared to video. And one of the partners we work with actually said that to get the same level of attention on augmented reality, you would need 14 to 20 video ads.
Wow.
Right. So that I was expecting a good result, but the difference is mind-blowing. And it just goes to show the potential of engaging formats, right? And who knows what the future would bring, because even the 2 and odd years I've been with Snap, what we tested 2 years ago versus now, so much has changed in the quality of production and in how closely lenses render, in real life. So that was like one finding that was, I think, surprised me. The other thing that surprised me was, and this was through the mobile ethnography and some of even the survey work that we did, was the various utility that augmented reality is providing consumers, right? I'm sure if you ask people, they typically say, oh, it's fun to try on shoes, or I'm trying on, makeup and whatnot with lenses, which is what you typically expect, or place that dragon, on a building. Yeah. So you would think that, oh, it's fun and it's entertaining. And to be fair, that's what all marketers thought. But for consumers, it went like a level deeper. And they said that, the reason why I do it and I buy now is because it gives me more confidence in the purchase decision. Because we were trying to see, how shopping occasions vary with AR, without, right? So confidence came up, and I think some of it is a consequence of the pandemic, right? They're like, well, I don't feel the need to go to a physical store. The store is here, which I never thought of it, that way. And I don't think we would have actually gotten to it if we had not observed behavior and then asked people why they did what they did. And now practically returning things are such a pain, and AR offers that substitute for them for returns. And that was done. We did the research, but it was also done by a third party. Even Harvard Business Review published research where they had shopping experiences with AR, without, and did like a controlled testing with Shopify, and found that shopping experiences with AR leads to 94% more conversion rate than without. And we kind of dug deeper into the why. So that to me was it was fascinating, because it showed me how far along people have adopted the technology even though if you ask them, do you know AR, they don't. We actually have to describe and we show visually various types of AR. Whenever I talk about augmented reality, I always tell people, well, you go to any website, you're seeing a product in 3D and you're like rotating. That is augmented reality, the simplest form of, tech. So yeah, that was like another, I would say, super fascinating finding for me, the deeper motivation into why people use augmented reality. And I'll just talk about one more, because there's so much work we do in this space. This is more practical when it comes to media mix, because obviously I work for a media platform, right? So I should talk about how to use augmented reality as part of your marketing mix. And one of the things that we realized is that through whether it's like using AR and trying to measure AR in MMM, right? Media mix modeling, trying to measure AR in our randomized campaign testing, like brand lift type research is one. You can't treat it the same way that you treat an audio or a video, because an impression in an AR doesn't mean anything unless you're looking at the experience itself and how long people are spending on it. Are they sharing it with others, right? It needs to be treated differently. So that was like a big finding. And two is, there was this huge hypothesis of, well, should I start a campaign with AR because it's so unique and different, and then have like my video campaign, like sequencing what works? And we did this whole complicated research with sequencing of AR and discovered that AR in the middle, like between two videos, led to the best results. It made people more curious about the brand. It made them want to search more about the brand, and the brand felt more innovative. And the reason behind it is that people are now so used to online video that AR offered like this moment of delight, if you will, right, within your clutter of video. That one was a very rewarding finding, because that design and to actually execute the research was not easy.
No, sure. No, be interesting to know if those that use AR as part of their buying journey, do they have a higher basket size or spend than those who don't?
Well, I think it really depends on the category, and by I can also tell it's like a confirmation bias. So
Sure.
Snapchatters usually tend to be more affluent and hence tend to spend more. And obviously our platform has a lot of AR. So I'm going to say yes, but by virtue of platform as well, so that's what we've observed. And I think there's definitely like less returns when AR is involved as part of the purchase journey, which, I think the last I read was the returns business is a $4 billion problem for retailers. So I think we're like trying to solve that problem with technology.
Well, when you think about the technology adoption curve, I think we're well past the early adopters, and we are getting into the mainstream now, aren't we? The majorities per se with augmented reality. So it is definitely opening up to the massive market.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if I can quote, I think this was numbers from, I'm going to say Deloitte, where they said that by 2025, so that's like next year, there's going to be 4.3 billion people in the world who would be what they consider frequent AR users. That's almost 75% of the population. So it is getting more mainstream. It's also because the technology itself is now scalable. So it just does not live within, the platform. Now you can incorporate in your site, in your app. There are even stores, if you will, if you go, where there'll be a mirror and you can try on, things. We're also seeing it expand beyond categories, because obviously, when AR first started, it was easy to use it in retail, right? It was easy to use for personal care. But now we are seeing, I think there was like a latest campaign in Australia where it was used by the Great Barrier Reef Foundation to, show how pollution is harming the barrier reef. NHS uses it to drive blood donation. automotive companies are using. So the categories which are adopting the technology is also growing, making it more commonplace. The other thing I also notice is that the adoption varies by markets as well. Obviously US, because most innovation happens or comes out of this country, or at least like the bigger companies, you would see their first to market. But for us, like Middle East is a huge market where it's such a advanced e-commerce market, right? People are always shopping on mobile. They kind of skip the desktop shopping. So you would see a lot more adoption of augmented reality in that market. Similarly, some markets in APAC, which again skip broadband, went to mobile. So you see differences geographically as well.
Sure, and it's also quite an interesting space for marketers to be playing in when you can control both the physical and the augmented reality. So both the augmented and the reality. So having the physical setup as well as the digital and merging them together.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I heard you've also been doing quite a bit of research surrounding how people shop and the impact that AR has had on the shopping experience itself. Can you tell us a bit more about what you found out here?
So this was, we partner a lot with media agencies globally in some of the work we do. And one of our partners is Publicis, and we do a lot of work around AR and commerce with them. And we've done like research now for I think 3 years or so. And every year it was fascinating to see the adoption of AR and how it's changing. So one of the, I think I've spoken about some of like the broad utility people are seeing when it comes to AR and shopping, in terms of convenience as an in-store substitute, as well as provide more confidence when it comes to decision-making and reducing returns. But what we also observed, and this was through what I would consider a very traditional technique of max diff, if you will, and turf analysis. We wanted to understand, how important is AR in the purchase journey? Like we know people from last year's or a couple of years ago, people are starting to use augmented reality in their shopping journey. Brands are providing it, but we wanted to understand, where are you in the hierarchy? Is it like a nice to have? Is it something that you definitely rely on? And what we noticed was once people started using augmented reality or used to those features, they might not call it AR, but they know, oh, I want to try on, I want to be able to change different colors in an outfit before picking and so on. Once they started using those kind of features, like 7 out of the top 10 features that would help in brand decision-making were augmented reality influenced features. And it actually varied by purchase journey, which I was not expecting, because I was like, well, try on and, you would buy. But when you're at brand discovery to when you're considering what to buy to the final journey, the features that consumers were looking for varied, which I thought was fascinating. And what that means for marketers is we don't say do AR, right? Now it goes down to, okay, what's the purpose of your campaign, if you will, right? What's your audience? What do you want to do? And accordingly design your AR, right? Design the experience. If you're at brand discovery, then it's better to do a more complex AR experience with several clicks where people are like playing around and discovering the brand. And it has like features which enable them to check the various options which are there, and so on and so forth. But if you are very much towards a lower funnel DR kind of campaign, then make sure you have a try-on feature, right? So that you're able to convert them at the moment of purchase. So that's something we discovered in the retail process. And I'm sure as we do more research in this space, we'd like continue to discover more things.
Yeah, sure. And I'm assuming you've been able to have a bit of a key role and influence the brand awareness, brand tracking sides of things as well for big corporates too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously we have to prove the value of the platform, which also means measuring what they do. And that's why I told you, I think that when we did like a huge MMM analysis, we realized that you can't just ingest impressions and cost of AR like you would other formats. You also have to look at things like share and play time, because it's a format that's meant to be engaged with. It's not just a reach format, if you're thinking as a media planner. So even our best practices when it comes to how to ingest data for MMM and how do you judge how effective AR is needs to be thought a bit differently.
It just reminded me of one of the Marvel series, Loki, and how there's missed minutes, and it's almost an M&M that just could pop up everywhere.
I love that.
So one of your key audiences is Gen Z. Sure, you've spent some time studying their behavior, and a lot of people are interested in what this generation is doing online. Are you able to share some of the findings that you've found for the theme?
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot of work around Gen Z, Gen Z, depending on whoever is listening in, because it's just like how, there were so many headlines on millennials broke every, I think, category under the world. I feel like, this generation, they are the first digital native generation. They are the most multicultural of generations. And they're also, getting the tail end of all of the crises that the millennial faced, right? So, and hence you would expect some seismic shift in their culture and their values and the way that they interact and the way that they shop. So obviously we want to understand them because they use the platform a lot, right? I think in the US about 90% of Gen Z use Snapchat. So it was very important for us to understand the audience. And what we realized was that there's their values, which is quite unique. Some of it has some overlap with millennials, which is expected. And then the way they interact with media and with brands is different that, marketers need to take into consideration. When it comes to culture, I think some of the stuff that's kind of spoken about them is true, like their approach to work is different. They don't want to be that competitive. They have they focus more on sustainability and so on. But what I found fascinating, or what caught my attention, was they're very much focused on like self-improvement and self-experience. So I think I always say like the Gen Xers are the strivers, if you will. The millennials are, okay, what else am I going to face? Whereas the Gen Z are in a way a bit more optimistic, but optimistic in the sense that they want to work on themselves. So they're constantly looking for learning experiences and looking to better themselves. So that's how, brands need to think about them. So from a cultural value, that was different. We call it like self in progress, I think. I think that leads to why they want better future, right? More fairer future. The other, I think, value that like kind of stuck with me is there's the need for community, but there's a need for the community to be interactive and playful, which we don't see that's the difference in other, compared to other generations. And I feel it's because they're digital natives. So they're very much used to texting from whenever they were younger, right? I'm not Gen Z, I'm a millennial. So that kind of entered, into my teens, but this is how this generation grew up. They love the avatars, they love the bitmojis, the fact that they can be different people in different times, which I think has implications on how you think about them and how you're thinking about creating content for them. And when it comes to media, obviously they're used to like short form content. So they don't have every generation has shorter attention span than the previous generation. It's just, how things are. Part of it, I believe, I'm not an expert, is like physiological, neurological. Part of it is cultural. But some of the attention research that we have done is, again, it proves that their attention span is lower, but the amount of information they process in the first 4 seconds is higher. So even the way they are thinking and processing information is different. It's because that's what they're used to, right? From a media consumption perspective. And they're very visual people as well. So I'm just giving you broad strokes. I can talk about them for like hours on end, but I'm talking about some of the things that's like the big things that stuck in my mind that I feel will define how brands approach them for messaging and content.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating point, the attention and how much people can, or this generation can consume and compute in that short period of time. And then the impact that that has on brand loyalty as well. So what do brands have to do in order to keep staying relevant and in minds of consumers?
Oh yeah, I mean, you actually triggered something in my head because yes, we do a lot of attention work, but we had this hypothesis that there's this headline, right? Gen Z, it's all about purpose. So we were like, oh, is it really? Is it really? Or did they say it's for purpose? So we wanted to test the hypothesis, and we actually did some what we call immersion research. So this was looking at heart rate variability. And it is a technique that was developed in a university in California. I forgot, Santa Clara. And it is, the number is validated to sales. So if the immersion is higher, it's predicted towards higher sales. So we thought, okay, it's a valid measure to look at. And we have done already a lot of cognition research around generation. So we were expecting immersion rates perhaps to be lower among the generation, but we did not know what the outcomes would be, like you said. Right? How do brands reach them? So we tested different types of messaging. So we tested like purpose-driven messaging. So this could be either like a social message, in this case, we use the same brand. And we tested, messages around it's sustainable, it's good for the environment, but it's also a good employer, which is very critical for this generation. And then we had like your brand messaging and position and messaging, and then like new product pricing. So we had like, the range of messaging. And, what we discovered was that when Gen Z really walked the talk. So attention, paid by millennials, Gen Z, if the brand is relevant, was quite equal, but it peaked for the younger generation when purpose-driven messaging came on screen, right? Whereas millennials, if you grab their attention, kind of stays flat and then it goes away. And that translated to outcomes. So they think better about the brand if they think the brand is being genuine about the message. But if it's not, they just rip it to shreds. So, that's something that we discovered. So Gen Z truly, walk the talk. So I think brands also have to genuinely walk the talk and not just do it for the sake of. And, the other thing about this generation is we realize they know a lot about media and brands because they're already talking about, oh, I'm a creator, I have followers, what's my reach? And so they're way more educated in this field than we would like. So you can't pull the wool over their eyes. So if brand needs to connect with them, you have to be genuinely purpose-driven. Don't just manufacture it. And then as a brand, walk the talk. Then the generation will reward you.
Absolutely.
And that we actually saw come through in several pieces of work we did. Because apart from immersion, I've also done the attention measurement through eye tracking as well, where we tested. And one of the hypotheses we have is, do we need a 1-minute kind of anthem to deliver brand purpose, or can it be done in a shorter? And what we realized, at least on our platform, right, you could deliver a brand purpose message within 6 seconds and get people's attention. And it does lead to more than short-term sales, like long-term loyalty measures were much higher.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
That's good. It's good to hear. So interested to hear how Snap, or what makes Snap different to other social media platforms out there.
Well, again, it so happened that the marketing team was working on brand positioning for the year, which gave me the chance to research that particular area a lot for the last year or so. And, this is also one of the reasons why I chose to work for the platform, is because we're not a platform. We're a platform, I would say, that's built for relationship. And I can now say it with more confidence because I've seen the evidence as well when I do the research. You're not chasing followers, you're not chasing likes. So you don't have like thousands of people in your network on the platform. It really is your close friend and family. And you can't comment on a lot of things. You don't like a lot of things. So there's not a lot of vanity involved in it. In fact, the platform opens up to a camera, and then you have like your chat and then the other tabs as well. So that's like, I think, a huge differentiator. And that also came out in what people thought about the platform. And again, you do a lot of research, it can prove or disprove your hypothesis. And one of the hypotheses we have is, because it's really about close friends and families, perhaps Snap is a happier place compared to other platforms, in a world that's not always happy. And I think like the numbers were astounding. It's like 90% of people on the platform, like Snapchatters, are on the platform because they feel connected and they feel happy and they feel that, they have a personal relationship with the people. The other thing that I really, really appreciate about the platform is its privacy by default. So once you sign on the platform, you don't have to go to settings and make everything private. It's already private. So random people can't come and friend you, can't follow you, can't send you snaps. Obviously, the ephemerality of the app, so your messages do disappear, and no, we don't, keep it anywhere to bring it up many years later. And if somebody's taking a snapshot of that snap, you would be able to, it actually alerts you. So that's another aspect of the platform I think is unique in the world today.
No, very nice. It's good to hear the happy platform. That's nice. So look, we've talked about some really interesting things today, Aarti. Was there anything you'd like to add or leave us with before we wrap up today?
So that's like an excellent question. I think I need like almost a minute to think about it, because there's so much more, the team's doing that we can talk about.
So let's just narrow the focus down. So advice for market researchers and how they could potentially utilize AR-based insights as along with their traditional research methodologies, etc. as well.
Yeah. So I would say advice for market researchers is, be open to experimentation. When you are studying new technology or newer audiences, I think often we are like in a rush to execute the brief, but sometimes it does, if you can just spend a little bit of time figuring out how and what are the various ways you can do it, because and then find great partners, at least, if you're like me on the advertiser or platform side, who are willing to do that experimentation with you, would be my advice. The other thing is, if you're using a new technology, like test a lot, test and learn. And as you learn, keep iterating how you would think about measuring, how you think about researching. I think that's something that we have learned. Like even now, if I look at some of the work we've done 2 years ago, I'm like, oh, did we do this? We are now doing it in a different way. But if we had not done that, we wouldn't be where we are today. So there's no like silver bullet, I would say, to doing this kind of work. And I'm a global researcher, and I like the fact that I have a world view, because it's not just technology, the culture and the current situation also impacts the way you would do research and the outcomes that you'd get out. And I think we kind of forget. And we think that, one methodology or one type of questioning like applies to all. And that's not the case. I think especially if you're working in multi-market, you need to be mindful of the nuances of not just the culture, but the stage of technology in each of the markets. And sometimes your lead market might not be your largest market when it comes to how advanced the technology is.
Yeah. Very interesting. Well, I look forward to hearing more with Snap and what you're doing with them. Thank you so much for sharing all the insights you have today and your perspectives. We're very appreciative of it, Aarti.
All right, thank you so much.
That's all right. And thank you to everyone else who's listened in today as well. If you have liked what you've heard today, please subscribe to the podcast. Feel free to share it with others and even leave a review if you'd like to as well. We'd appreciate that. Until next time, thanks for listening to Now That's Significant.